This presentation is about the essential components of the IEP, what every parent should know about the IEP. In this presentation, we will give you an overview of the components of an individualized education plan, also referred to as an IEP. The IEP is the plan that informs how the student will receive special education services. Key information for parents on understanding their role in the development of the IEP will be included in this presentation, including parent participation, essential components of the IEP, and parent tips. Before we talk about the components of the IEP, this is an overview of the special education delivery cycle. It begins with the referral, also known as identification. Then it moves on to step 2, the evaluation, for which parental consent is required. In step 3, we have the determination of eligibility. From there, the team develops the individualized education program in step 4. And that's what we will be focused on today. Then we move on to implementation of the IEP. And from there, we have ongoing IEP monitoring and the annual or triennial reviews. Remember, this is an ongoing cycle. Every 3 years, the district will contact you to discuss a reevaluation plan. Throughout the special education delivery cycle, it is important to remember that parents are an equal partner in the special education process. Parents need to be at every decision-making meeting, in person, on Zoom, on the phone. School and parents should be able to work something out to be available for all meetings. Parents can share what works at home and what doesn't work. They can share their concerns so that school personnel understand their concerns. Again, parents are an equal partner in the special education process. Here we see the dictionary definition of partnership with the words equal, independence, and obligations highlighted. In this partnership, each partner is equal and maintains a certain independence while also having obligations to each other. Regarding parental rights in special education, parents are an equal partner in decision-making with the right to give or withhold consent for each evaluation and for initial services. Parents must be at every decision-making meeting. Parents are expected to share their concerns for enhancing their child's education. What is an IEP? The IEP is a roadmap because it guides how the school will support your child's learning. It is also a process. It brings together a team to assess a child's needs and create a plan. As a product, the IEP is the written document that outlines the services, supports, and goals for the student. Most importantly, the IEP is the main way parents participate in the special education process. It is also a legal agreement between the school district and the family to provide the services and supports your child needs. The IEP is a written plan that describes the child's special education program in detail. These are the different sections of that plan. The present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, also known as the PLAF. This is the narrative section that describes a student's learning and educational needs. Measurable annual goals that are tied to the curriculum should be included and should address every area of need. Special education services include specially designed instruction or supplementary aids and services. Related services must be defined with beginning and ending dates of service and the location, duration, and frequency of the service. Related services include occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, physical therapy, transportation, and extended school year, among others. Placement decisions should be based on educating the student in the least restrictive environment appropriate. The placement discussion should happen at the end of the IEP meeting once the needs and goals of the student have been agreed upon. Parental concerns is the section of the IEP that formally documents what parents are seeing at home. It includes their concerns about academic, social, behavioral, or functional skills and their priorities for their child's education. This section ensures that parents' input is recorded and considered. In the transition plan, we start talking about the child's goals for the future beyond high school and how to address those goals so that they will be achieved. What educational or other steps must be taken to help the student reach their goals. We start talking about a transition plan at age 14 in New Jersey. Participation in assessment involves documenting statewide testing and what that will look like for the student. Some students with IEPs will take the statewide tests that all general education students will take with accommodations or without accommodations, and some students will take alternative proficiency assessments. The student's needs should also be addressed in the IEP. This includes behavior. If a behavior intervention plan has been developed for the student, it should be in the IEP, as well as how behavior will be observed and monitored. Language and communication should be addressed. For example, does the student speak another language primarily or use an assistive communication device? Assistive technology must be addressed as well. An assistive technology assessment can be done to determine what is needed. And assistive technology can range from low-tech devices like pencil grips to high-tech devices like Chromebooks. Extended school year, also known as ESY, should be addressed in the IEP as well. Participation in non-academic activities, also known as extracurricular activities, should be addressed, and visual or hearing impairment needs must be addressed as well. Who develops the IEP? The IEP team. Parents are equal members of the IEP team. There are also other roles that must be present on the IEP team. This list shows those roles: case manager, general educator, special educator, other specialists as needed. That could be speech and language pathologist, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, an agency representative or someone that can commit agency resources should be present as well, must be present, and someone to interpret evaluation results. So these are all the roles that must be present on the IEP team. It doesn't need to be 6 individuals. It could be that one person takes on multiple roles, but the roles must be filled. It is also important for the student to be at the IEP meeting for as long as they can be. This is how they can learn about the process and learn to advocate for themselves. Excusal from the IEP meeting. If any of these roles will not be present at the IEP meeting, the parent must give written consent for that team member not to be there. A request for excusal must be in writing and should be sent with the notice of the meeting. The parent may not be intimidated to consent and do not need to give consent for give any reason or for their refusal or for their consent. With the parental written consent, a member of the IEP team may be excused from the meeting if they provide written information to the team in advance of the meeting. Each of the student's teachers, including a general education teacher, must be informed of the responsibilities related to IEP implementation and specific accommodations, modifications, and supports that must be provided. This slide explains how services are defined under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. IDEA requires that special education and related services be based on peer-reviewed research to the extent practicable. What that means is that the school should be using evidence-based practice, methods and services that research has shown to be effective, whenever it is reasonably possible to do so. Special education refers to specially designed instruction that meets a child's unique needs. Related services are the supports that help the child benefit from that instruction, such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling, or transportation. Parents can use this language to question if a school recommends a service or placement that does not appear appropriate or research-based. Parents can ask, what research supports this recommendation? Or is this an evidence-based practice? Or are there other research-supported options? Parents can also use this language to request services that are supported by research, such as inclusive practices, meaning educating students alongside their peers with appropriate supports, or positive behavior supports, which focus on proactive evidence-based behavior strategies. The IEP is built step by step, and each part plays a key role in supporting the student. Let's walk through how it's developed. The starting point is the PLAF, the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. This is the narrative section of the IEP that describes the student's current strengths and needs, whether they be academic, social, behavioral, or functional. All of them should be included in the PLAF. It answers, where is the student now? The measurable annual goals and short-term objectives are based directly on the needs that are identified in the PLAF. They provide clear, targeted outcomes for what the student should achieve within a year, along with steps to get there. This is the instructional content of the IEP. Program modifications and related services indicate what supports the student needs to access the curriculum and school environment. That includes accommodations, assistive technology, therapy, and more. This section ensures that the student has access to the education. Finally, the IEP must include how progress will be measured and how often it will be reported. This is about accountability, making sure the plan is working and the student is growing. Each part connects to the next. It's a logical flow from understanding the student's needs to setting goals, to providing support, and finally to tracking progress. The PLAF is the starting point of the IEP. It explains how the student's disability affects their ability to take part in the general curriculum, or for preschoolers in age-appropriate activities. It is the narrative section that describes the student's learning and educational needs. Summaries from most recent evaluations should be included here. It must address both academic and functional performance and should include both strengths and needs. It needs to be current, measurable, and easy to understand. It should include the student's strengths, parents' concerns, academic and non-academic areas impacted by the disability, and every area of need that will connect to the goals in the IEP. In short, the PLAF answers, where is the student now? This is the foundation we build the rest of the plan on. The PLAF describes how a student is currently performing in both academic and non-academic areas that are affected by their disability. It identifies the student's strengths, what they can do and what is going well, as well as their needs, what they are not yet able to do or where they are struggling. This section is extremely important because it forms the foundation of the IEP. The information in the PLAF determines what accommodations, adjustments, and special services the student needs in order to access the general curriculum and participate appropriately in school activities. It also creates the link to the rest of the IEP. The needs identified in the PLAF are what get developed into measurable annual goals, benchmarks, or short-term objectives. In short, the PLAF drives everything else in the IEP. If it is clear and specific, the rest of the plan will be stronger and more effective. When we talk about IEP goals, they need to be SMART. That means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. They must include measurable annual goals, and in New Jersey, they must also include benchmarks or short-term objectives, even though IDEA no longer requires short-term objectives for all students. These goals should directly address the child's individual needs so they can be involved in and make progress in the general curriculum and any other educational needs that arise from the disability. So while federal law relaxed the requirement, New Jersey regulations still expect that benchmarks or short-term objectives will be a part of every IEP. The goals serve as our roadmap, helping to track progress and guide instruction and services throughout the year. When developing IEPs, we think in two parts, goals and objectives. Goals are the long-range plans, what we want the student to achieve by the end of the year. Objectives are the smaller, measurable steps that guide the student toward that goal. A well-written goal should be a positive statement that clearly describes an observable skill or behavior. It should be based on the student's present levels of performance and supported by short-term objectives that break the goal into manageable progress points. Together, goals and objectives ensure that we're not just setting expectations, we're creating a plan to help the student succeed step by step. When writing IEP goals, it is important to include key elements that make the goal clear, measurable, and trackable. So let's break it down. The who, this is usually the student. Who is working toward the goal? What specific skill or behavior do we want the student to learn or improve? How will the skill be demonstrated, or to what level of accuracy or independence? Where, in what setting or under what conditions will the skill be practiced or observed? When, by when should the student be able to demonstrate the goal, usually within the IEP year? And mastery. How often or how well should the student perform the behavior to show mastery? Each element of a goal ensures that the goal is measurable and meaningful, so everyone on the team knows exactly what success will look like. When developing IEP goals and objectives, it is important to really think about what will be meaningful and relevant for the student. Here are some key things to keep in mind. They should align with New Jersey core curriculum content standards. Goals should support access to grade level learning whenever possible. They should consider the student's preferences and interests. What motivates the student? What do they want to learn? Goals should also reflect your input. What do you see as important for growth? They should ensure that they are chronologically age appropriate, even if skill levels vary. We want to think about whether the student can apply these skills in new places and real-world situations. We want to consider goals that support physical development, promote social interaction, and expand the student's experiences. And finally, we want to focus on functionality. Will this goal help the student be more independent, successful, or connected in their daily life? Keeping these factors in mind will help us write goals that are not only compliant, but truly student-centered and future-focused. Here is an example of some goals that were included in a young man's IEP. My older brother Daryl. After 12 years of schooling, my brother Daryl, who is 18, has learned to do a lot of things. He can sort blocks by color, but he can't sort clothes for washing. He can count to 100 from memory, which is impressive, but he doesn't know how to calculate the correct change when paying for a $2.59 sandwich. He can put 100 pegs in a board with 95% accuracy in less than 10 minutes, showing fine motor skills and focus, but he can't put quarters into a vending machine to buy a soda. So this example shows us why it's so important to write goals that focus on functional real-life skills, skills that help a student succeed independently, not just academically and not just on isolated tasks. This slide explains what related services means under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Special education isn't just about classroom instruction. It also includes additional supports and services a student may need in order to fully benefit from their education. If a child can't access or make progress in special education without these supports, the school must provide them as part of the child's IEP. So included is transportation, getting the student to and from school or special programs safely if the disability prevents use of regular transportation. Speech language pathology and audiology will help with communication, speech, and hearing so the student can participate in learning. Psychological services such as assessments, counseling, and mental health support related learning and behavior. Physical and occupational therapy can improve movement, coordination, and daily living skills needed for school activities. Recreation, including therapeutic recreation, includes structured play and physical activities that can help develop social and physical skills. Counseling, including rehabilitative counseling, emotional or social support to help the child function and learn in school. Orientation and mobility services includes training for students who are blind or visually impaired to navigate the environment safely and independently. Medical services for diagnostic or evaluation purposes may be needed to determine eligibility or understand a student's needs. School health services, that is nursing or related healthcare provided during the school day, for example, medication or feeding tubes. Social work services includes support for family or environmental factors that affect the student's education, connecting families to community resources. And parent counseling and training can help parents understand their child's needs and learn strategies to support learning at home. Every IEP needs to include a plan for how the student's progress on their annual goals will be measured. This means we need to be clear on how we will know if the student is making progress, whether that is through tests, observations, work samples, or data collection. It has to be something we can actually measure. The second part of this slide is about communication. The IEP also needs to say how parents will be kept informed. This has to happen at least as often as regular report cards go out, but it should also explain whether the student is on track to meet their goals by the end of the year. So it's not just here's how they're going, how it's going, how they're doing, but also are we on pace to reach the goal? That way, families and teachers can work together and make changes as necessary. The IEP must explain the extent to which the student will participate in general education classes, as well as extracurricular and non-academic activities. This clarifies how much time the student will spend with peers and in what settings. It also must include a statement describing any modifications in how the student will take state or district-wide assessments. For example, extended time or alternate formats. The IEP must specify when services will begin, along with the frequency, duration, and location of those services. This ensures that the plan is clear and accountable. And finally, for in-class resource programs, the IEP must state how often and how long the resource teacher will be present in the general education classroom. Overall, this ensures transparency and clearly outlines how services will be delivered. Transition services are the coordinated set of activities designed to help students move successfully from school to adult life, including post-secondary education, employment, and independent living. Transition planning is part of the student's IEP. The IEP must include a statement of the state and local graduation requirements that the student must meet to earn a regular diploma. If the student is exempted from any standard graduation requirements, the IEP must provide a reason for the exemption and describe alternate proficiencies, alternate ways that the student will show achievement that will qualify them for a state-endorsed diploma. The IEP must include a statement of transition from elementary to secondary programs. This is when the students are moving from middle school or an elementary program to their high school secondary program. The IEP should describe how this transition will be supported academically, socially, and in terms of services. Transition services for adult life beginning at age 14. The IEP must include a statement of transition services needed to prepare the student for life after high school, such as career exploration and job skills, post-secondary education or training, independent living skills, community participation. IDEA 2004 states that the date for transition to begin is at age 16. However, New Jersey's state code remains at 14. So some states like New Jersey still have stricter requirements, and they require transition planning to begin at age 14. By age 16, every student's IEP must include a statement of transition services. However, schools can and should begin earlier if it's appropriate for the student, or if in a state where it is mandated by the state law. The IEP must identify any outside agencies beyond the school that will play a role in the student's transition. This could be vocational rehabilitation agencies, developmental disability services, employment or job training programs. This ensures that everyone involved is coordinated and that the services continue smoothly after graduation. The IEP must include appropriate, measurable post-secondary goals that are based on age-appropriate transition assessments, related to training or education, employment, independent living skills if appropriate. Transition services must reflect the student's preferences. The plan must be individualized, meaning it considers what the student wants for their future, their interests, their goals, their choices, not just what adults think is best. This helps make the transition meaningful and student-driven. The IEP should clearly define the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved in implementing the plan. This ensures accountability and clarifies who is responsible for delivering specific services and supports. The IEP may include any exemptions from local disciplinary policies when appropriate, to ensure the student's disability is properly considered in behavioral decisions. The IEP should outline the instructional strategies that will be used to support the student's learning. This helps ensure that teaching approaches are intentional and aligned with the student's needs. And finally, the IEP must provide the rationale for the type of education and placement selected. In other words, it should explain why this setting and level of support are appropriate for the student. The IEP team shall consider the student's strengths and parents' concerns. This highlights what the student does well and any major concerns shared by the parents. The IEP team shall also consider evaluation results, behavioral needs, language needs for students with limited English proficiency, instruction in Braille for visually impaired students, communication needs, including special needs of students who are deaf or hard of hearing, needs for assistive technology, and needs for extended school year. This slide explains how assistive technology is documented in the IEP. First, a device is defined as any item, piece of equipment, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve a child's functional capabilities. This can range from something as simple like a pencil grip to more advanced tools such as communication devices or specialized software. Second, the IEP must also consider assistive technology services. A service includes any support that directly helps a child select, acquire, or use an assistive technology device. That includes evaluating the child's needs, providing the equipment, maintaining or customizing the device and replacing it if necessary. It can also involve coordinating assistive technology with other therapies and providing training and technical assistance for the child, family members, and school staff. Assistive technology is not just about the device, it's also about the support and services needed to ensure that the technology is used effectively. Assistive technology may be delivered as part of special education services, as a related service, or as a supplementary aid and service, depending on how it supports the student. When provided as a supplementary aid and service, assistive technology is used to help the student participate in regular education classes or other school-related settings. Supplementary aids and services are supports that enable children with disabilities to be educated alongside their peers without disabilities to the maximum extent appropriate. This slide explains extended school year, or ESY services. ESY refers to special education and related services provided beyond the normal school year based on the student's IEP. These services are at no cost to parents. ESY must be provided if it is necessary to ensure that the student receives a free appropriate public education, or FAPE. Importantly, these services must meet state standards and are not limited to specific categories of disabilities. Finally, ESY is not automatically limited in duration. The amount of services is determined by the student's individual needs. ESY is intended to prevent significant regression and support continuity in learning when a student requires it. The placement decision is a team decision. It is decided by the team, including the parents. It is based on the IEP. Decisions are guided by the student's individualized education program. Placements must follow the least restrictive environment principle. The placement decision is reviewed annually and is based on the student's current needs. Whenever possible, the placement should be close to the child's home. If a student is placed outside of general education, it must be justified in writing in the IEP. A child cannot be removed from general education just because they need curriculum modification. The decision to place a student in a more restrictive environment, meaning a setting with fewer opportunities to interact with non-disabled peers, should always be based on individual need and not convenience. And it must be backed up by the IEP team with persuasive, well-documented reasons. Here are some valid, legally defensible reasons for making that decision. First, if the student's IEP goals and objectives can't be met in a more integrated setting, even with reasonable accommodations and support, then a more restrictive setting may be needed to ensure progress. If supplementary aids and services still are not enough to help the student succeed in a less restrictive environment, that's a key factor. For example, if integration actually prevents learning, either for the student with the disability or for others in the classroom, that's a legitimate concern that should be discussed among the IEP team. If inclusion has harmful effects on the student emotionally, behaviorally, or academically, or if it lowers the quality of services that they need, those are also valid reasons to consider a more supportive, possibly more specialized setting. This is never a decision taken lightly, but it must always focus on what's best for the individual student based on data, observation, and their unique learning needs. Now, let's look at what are not acceptable reasons for placing a student in a more restrictive setting. Here are some common but not legally defensible reasons. Categorical placement. This is when students are placed somewhere just because of their label or disability category is not allowed. We can't say all students with autism go here, for example. Administrative convenience is another unacceptable reason. Decisions can't be made just because it's easier for scheduling or staffing. Lack of resources like space, staff, or programs is also not a valid reason. It's the school's responsibility to provide the needed supports, not shift a student because resources are stretched. Placing students based on where services happen to be, for instance, sending them to a specific school just because that's where speech therapy is available, is not okay either, unless the placement is also what is best for the student. Curriculum delivery methods or content differences are not valid reasons either. We can't restrict placement just because the general education classroom teaches in a different style. And finally, cost. While it's usually not considered a valid reason, courts have noted that extreme costs might be relevant in rare situations. But generally, funding can't be used as the primary reason to deny a student a less restrictive placement. Placement decisions must be individualized and focused on what each student needs to succeed, not on what's easier or cheaper for the system. The following slides offer some important tips for parents as they navigate the IEP process. These are tips for participation in the eligibility meeting. So first, keep in mind that the eligibility meeting often moves directly into the IEP meeting. So come prepared to participate fully or know that you can request to schedule the IEP meeting for another day if you need more time. Consider postponing detailed discussion of the classification label until after your child's needs, annual goals, objectives, and services have been clearly identified. The focus should be on what your child needs, not just the category. Most importantly, do not let the classification label drive the planning process. The label does not determine services. Your child's individual needs do. The goal is to ensure that decisions are based on supports and outcomes and not simply on eligibility category. Preparing for the IEP meeting. So start by gathering and reviewing information. Make sure that you understand your child's current performance, the core curriculum, and your legal rights. If you need more information, ask for it. Completing an IEP checklist and listing any significant changes or concerns can also help you stay organized. Prepare a positive student profile. Identify related services for your child that your child may need, and think about any concerns with the current program. If you plan to bring a support person with you to the meeting, notify the case manager ahead of time. And document any phone calls that you have with members of the IEP team in the school. Find out who will attend the meeting and make sure enough time is scheduled and document important communications. Before the meeting, organize your materials, write down your questions, and be ready to clearly support your ideas and requests. Practice communicating assertively. During the meeting, remember you are an equal member of the team. So again, you are an equal member of the team. You can participate fully, take notes, and consider bringing someone for support. If appropriate, have your student participate as well. This is a great way for them to learn about the process and to learn how to advocate for themselves. Be prepared to negotiate. Review the IEP carefully before signing, and remember that an IEP can be revised if needed. Follow up important requests in writing and always end by thanking the team members for their collaboration. This slide focuses on ongoing support and monitoring after the IEP is developed. Remember, the IEP is written annually or sooner if needed, but planning does not stop once the student is placed. It's an ongoing process. Parents should continue using the resources of the Child Study Team and keep current copies of the IEP, the New Jersey Administrative Code, and local school policies so that they can stay informed. Attend teacher conferences and regularly discuss school at home. This can help you stay connected with your child's progress. Finally, becoming a school volunteer when possible can strengthen communication and build positive relationships. If there are any specific questions about a particular step in the process, you can attend one of our workshops. They're listed on our website, or you can contact SPAN for technical assistance. Our contact information is on the next slide. So you can contact us by phone, and you can also check out our website for training and resources.